In 1988, Kazuhiro Otomo's Akira exploded onto the scene. Filled with spectacular and striking cyberpunk imagery, it captivated audiences in Japan, and before long it enthralled audiences in the West too.
Don't watch the violence, you'll never get desensitized to it.
Cementing itself in pop culture and leading the way for more anime to capture the minds and imagination of the world, for better or worse.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the...
So of course, as soon as it could, Hollywood tried to make a live-action American version of the story.
Are you ready, talking bike? I was born ready, Canada!
Here's how it repeatedly failed. In the 90s, Sony Pictures bought the rights to the Akira manga.
Actually it's Akira.
With the hope of producing a live-action adaptation, but ultimately they abandoned the idea due to the high budgets required. In 2002, Sony sold the rights to Warner Bros. In a 7-figure deal, who have yet to materialize a live-action Akira for 2 decades, leaving the film in development hell. Soon after Warner Bros. Got hold of the rights, they appointed Stephen Norrington, director of Blade, to produce a screenplay alongside James Robinson and direct the adaptation. Norrington stated that he planned to make his adaptation more appealing to Western audiences, expressing that his adaptation would preserve the tone, the visual and epic scope of the original, while telling a somewhat more accessible story to Western audiences. This version heavily detracted from the original manga and film, such as making Tetsuo and Kaneda brothers instead of friends for some reason. However, the commercial failure of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, directed by Norrington and written by Robinson, led to the project falling through, and Akira would be shelved. It wouldn't be until 2008 when Warner Bros. Would try their hands at adapting Akira once again. This time with Leonardo DiCaprio joining as a producer, with him revealing that he's a big fan of Japanese anime. Warner Bros. Appointed director Rory Robinson for the film, an unusual choice as although he had experience with sci-fi, he had only made shorts, and Akira, a notoriously difficult to adapt and potentially costly project, would have been his first feature film. Nonetheless, Robinson teamed up with Gary Whitta as screenwriter, known for such hits as After Earth.
You guys never crash landed on Earth before?
Yeah, we've never.
No, I mean, technically, when you land in a plane, it's a controlled crash land. So technically, we have crash landed on Earth.
Okay. That's deep.
Their version would be adapting Otomo's original 6-volume manga series instead of the film, with plans to split it up into 2 or 3 films as the first installment, which would be covering the first 3 manga volumes, was a success and was slated for release in 2009. This version also made significant changes to the original, moving the setting away from Neo Tokyo and setting the film in Manhattan, which was now called New Tokyo, although New Manhattan was originally going to be its name. Why was there a New Tokyo in New York? Well, to still keep an American setting but avoid concerns of whitewashing, the script designed a situation in which Japan, which was doing well economically but becoming overpopulated, bought Manhattan Island from an economically crippled and desperate America, which resulted in New Tokyo, populated by about 10 million Japanese citizens alongside Americans. This was a way to combine the need for an American setting and characters, but still keep some aspects of the original, resulting in a mixture of cultures, somewhat similar to Blade Runner's Los Angeles. Years later, in an interview, Whitta stated that Otomo had told the production team to not be afraid to change things, and that he wanted to see an original and different interpretation, not just a straight-up remake. Though it seems Otomo did give a condition that he had to check and approve any adaptation attempt. In the same interview, Whitta went on to say that he personally rejects the argument that Akira is necessarily a Japanese story and that it's somehow sacrilegious to set a new adaptation of it anywhere else. I think many of the themes in that story are ones that speak to the human condition and are therefore relevant anywhere in the world. If that weren't true, the original version would have never been a hit outside of Japan. Still, he expressed that he and Robinson approached the project with appreciation for the story's cultural origins and wanted to be respectful of that. The film was intended to end with the destruction of Neo Tokyo and the rebirth of Akira, with subsequent films playing out the rest of the story, but ultimately the project was halted as the producers couldn't get a budget under $200 million, which Robinson said was a bit rich for what was proposed as an R-rated movie with no stars. Robinson left in 2009, but has since released a rip reel he made for the film and the film's concept art. A rip reel is created by a director to show what kind of film they're aiming for, using bits of already existing media. Robinson's rip reel, which he said was put together in 3 frantic weeks fueled by a lot of coffee, utilised bits from the original Akira film, X-Men, Blade Runner, The Dark Knight, The Matrix, and other films to try to get across the general idea he was going for, with some original visual tests at the end, showcasing how some of the elements of the source material would be adapted. Alongside this, we can also get an idea of the adaptation by looking at the concept art, where we can see how Neo Tokyo would look like, complete with bright signs in Japanese and towering skyscrapers, and how certain scenes would be like the biker gang fights and Tetsuo going sicko mode. Most interesting though is the concept art depicting Kaneda and Tetsuo. It seems Chris Evans was kept in mind to play him, clad in an all-red outfit with stars and stripes on one sleeve.
Hi, I'm Captain America.
Take off your clothes.
For Tetsuo, or Travis as it looks like they were going to rename him,
You talking to me?
it looks like they were envisioning Joseph Gordon-Levitt, straight up looking like a TikTok e-boy. With Robinson gone, Warner Bros. Appointed a new director. 2 in fact. Brothers Alan and Albert Hughes, directors of Menace to Society and Dead Presidents, though Alan would lead the project in 2011. The Hughes version would use Witter's script, but with rewrites done by Mark Ferguson and Hawk Ostby, both of whom were writers for Children of Men and Iron Man. This version was also planned to be the first of a series of films. Warner Bros. Required the film to be PG-13, as opposed to the anime's R rating. Considering all the violent and gory elements in Akira, this would have been difficult to do while still maintaining the core of the story. The script for this adaptation was leaked online, though it was unclear whose exact version it was. Nevertheless, it garnered criticism for digressing heavily from the source material. These changes include the setting being Neo-Manhattan, along with Kaneda and Tetsuo being brothers who are in their 30s, Kaneda being a black market doctor, and Tetsuo being an alienated junkie. Another thing was changing Akira from a child with psychic powers who was experimented on by the government and became a mysterious godlike figure, into a psychotic, murderous, creepy kid who carries a stuffed animal, sings unsettling nursery rhymes while casually murdering people with his mind powers. In particular, he often sings Frère Jacques. With one scene going as follows: "It's alright, Akira, no one's gonna hurt you, son. Just come with us and it'll all be fine." The little boy looks up, his hair standing on end, emitting a gentle pulse of static electricity as he begins to hum a slow, haunting version of Frère Jacques. It chills to the bone. In fact, every time Akira appears in the script, Frère Jacques is supposed to be played, with the closing scene being described like this. And there, strolling in between it all, Akira, teddy bear gripped in his hand, slowly, hauntingly humming the opening notes of Frère Jacques. Master Black. Everybody's gotta have their own theme song, I suppose. One more major change was swapping out the allusion to the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the original to allusions of a 9/11-like attack.
It reminds me of that tragedy.
The initial destruction of Tokyo in the original is often viewed as an insinuation of the atomic bombings of Japan in 1945. To try to adapt the sentiment for a 21st century American audience, the Hughes version made references to a planned attack which would result in the death of 400 million and incite a response from the nation similar to 9/11. Specifically in the script, an evil corporation named the Foundation is behind this, with their director, who is specifically described as British, saying there are 400 million Americans, a nation of consumers, desperate to find comfort from the disarray and terror of their world by spending money in ours. Using our subject as a threat would clearly implicate us, and no one likes to be the bad guy. But using his power simply presents another unsolved act of terrorism. Then we come in, heroes, breathing life into devastation once again. Additionally, Akira is now housed beneath a memorial bunker commemorating the initial destruction of the city. It's described as a blank expanse of concrete where 2 massive blue spotlights beam into the heavens, millions of names etched along the walls. Sounds familiar. That kind of looks like the Twin Towers.
ジェット燃料は鋼鉄の梁を溶かすことができません。
Furthermore, there was criticism over the handling of the character of Kei, who was renamed to Ki. She was said to be written in a rather simplistic and misogynistic manner. In the script, nobody believes Akira exists, like how nobody believed Voldemort returned. And in one scene where Ki and Kaneda are in a jail cell, she tries to convince Kaneda of the existence of Akira and Takashi, who was also renamed to Tobias, and the government's experimentations on them, with Kaneda replying back, "Honey, we're both behind bars, and while you're a real treat to look at, I've got a no crazy girl policy. So good luck with your quest. I'm sure you'll find Akira hiding out with the Easter Bunny and Santa someplace." Later on in the script, this following scene occurs. Ki and Kaneda reach the bottom of the stairs, flip open their cases and begin peeling off their business attire, revealing street clothes beneath. Ki turns away. her bare back exposed. She feels Kanada's eyes on her, peers over her shoulder. Pay attention, Kanada. You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. She slips on something tight and sleek as he assembles his rifle. Might be worth it.
Smooth like butter.
If the online backlash against the script wasn't enough, the casting calls for the film led to allegations of whitewashing, with actors such as Keanu Reeves, Brad Pitt, James Franco and Ryan Gosling touted as potential leads, all of whom ultimately passed on the project. Star Trek actor George Takei created an online petition calling for the film to cast Asian actors, criticizing the casting of white actors and comparing the project to The Last Airbender and its critical and commercial flop, saying, "I think it's pointless, so I thought I would say Warner Bros. A bit of failure by warning them on what will most likely happen if they continue in that vein."
That one there was a violation. Personally, I wouldn't have it.
This is all in reaction to a purported shortlist of actors being considered for the lead roles, including Robert Pattinson, who when asked about a role in an interview, said he loves the movie and he likes motorbikes. Alongside him, Andrew Garfield and James McAvoy were being considered, all for the role of Tetsuo, with Garrett Hedlund, Michael Fassbender, Chris Pine, Joaquin Phoenix, Zac Efron and Justin Timberlake for the role of Kanada. Keanu Reeves was the one who came closest to being involved in the film and was Warner Bros.' main choice, but when he passed on it, the project would soon be shut down. But it would soon be back on track in July 2011, when Warner Bros. Hiring Jaume Colette Serra, director of Orphan, Jungle Cruise and the film that has to save the DCEU. With Steve Kloves, who worked on a number of Harry Potter films and The Amazing Spider-Man, as screenwriter, to provide a revised version of a draft by Albert Torres. The synopsis for the film was leaked online, revealing that Kanada and Tetsuo are still brothers in this version, though Kanada is now a bar owner. The reported cast for the film included Garrett Hedlund as Kanada and Kirsten Stewart as Key, with Gary Oldman being offered the role of the Colonel before it went to Ken Watanabe. Helena Bonham Carter was also reportedly going to play Lady Miyako, and Ezra Miller was purportedly approached to play Tetsuo. Ezra Miller playing someone who's deranged and destroys everything in his path. I just can't see it.
I need friends.
Paul Dano and Dane DeHaan were also approached to play Tetsuo, as was Keira Knightley, probably not for the role of Tetsuo. As you can see, they still weren't really going for the teenage look.
Yeah, they cast people in the late 20s, early 30s to play up.
This attempt would be greenlit in October 2011, and production was to start in early 2012. However, as filming was preparing to start in January, Warner Bros. Stopped the production, citing issues with the film's budget, which is already a relatively low $90 million. Though it seems Warner Bros. Wanted it to be even lower, $60 million. Additionally, they also had problems with the script and the casting. Colette Serra would then lead the project but return in August 2013. The next year, Dante Harper would be hired to create a new draft of the screenplay, but by March 2015, Colette Serra said that no progress on the film had been made. Once again, another screenwriter was hired to rewrite the screenplay, this time being Marco Ramirez in July 2015, but in the end, no progress materialized. In an interview in February 2014, Colette Serra revealed what he thought of Akira, commenting that in the story, nobody's interesting. Tetsuo is interesting because weird shit happens to him, and Kanada is so two-dimensional. That's part of Japanese culture, they never have strong characters, they're used as a way to move the other philosophy forward, so it seems he had trouble trying to personally resonate with the source material and adapt it. Once again, Akira was put on the back burner. After Colette Serra, Warner Bros. Offered multiple directors a chance to direct, including Justin Lin, director of multiple Fast and Furious films, George Miller, director of Mad Max, who turned it down due to other commitments, and Jordan Peele, who declined as he wanted to focus on his own original projects, though he said he is a huge fan of the film and even put the famous bike slide in Nope.
You know, there's a moment where we do the famous motorcycle, the Kaneda motorcycle slide.
I understood that reference.
At one point, it was even rumoured Akira would be Christopher Nolan's new film to be released in 2017, the first of a trilogy, but these rumours turned out to be false. The actual film was Dunkirk. Eventually, in September 2017, Taika Waititi, known for What We Do in the Shadows and Thor Ragnarok, accepted the role to write and direct the film. This project script would be written by Waititi and Michael Galamko, and an announcement was made in May 2019 that the film would be released on May 21st, 2021, with shooting to start in 2019 in California, which would have afforded the film an $18.5 million tax allocation from the state, with DiCaprio still on as producer. Waititi has stated his version would be adapting and taking inspiration from the manga, and providing a different take to the original film, mentioning that he loves the books and the movie, but he does not want to do a remake.
Love the movie, but I would not do a remake of the movie. I would do an adaptation of the books.
Furthermore, he also announced that he would be choosing to cast Asian teenage actors, and would choose lesser known, unfound and untapped talent, avoiding whitewashing and significant changes to the characters. This was basically confirmed in July 2019 with a casting call for a project called Box 28. 28 being the subject number Akira was assigned in the government experiments. The lead roles mainly called for Asian males aged 18 to 24, with the first two roles being described as Jun, a sharp-eyed, sinewy, tough, handsome, cool leader of a street gang of teenagers, and Koichi, who's constantly forced to punch up in order to survive. These two roles seem to be a fit for Kaneda and Tetsuo. The casting call also goes on to describe roles which fit the characters of Kei, Kaori, Yamagata, Kai, Takashi, and Kyoko. Although the film seemed to be going to plan, the shooting date kept getting further and further delayed because of reworks on the script, until the production was eating into Waititi's obligation for the fourth Thor movie, which meant Akira had to be postponed until Waititi could finish Thor Love and Thunder. The mouse gets what the mouse wants, and Akira was eventually put on pause in July 2019, soon after the casting call, with Warner Bros. Removing Akira from its intended May 21, 2021 release date, placing it with The Matrix Resurrection. Thankfully, Thor Love and Thunder turned out to be a massive undivisive success. In October 2019, Waititi expressed that he was still committed to the project once Thor was completed, though in an interview later in February 2020, he stated that Thor had caused Akira to be pushed back at least 2 years, and the film may still happen, though he was unsure whether he would still be involved with it. But then in August 2021, he reaffirmed he was still trying to make it, and he didn't want to give up on the film. But as of yet, a live-action Akira still hasn't appeared, and it may not for a long while, especially since Warner Bros. Seems to be going through some trouble right now. So what is it that keeps a live-action Akira from lifting off? Well, you know, there's the whole casting issue and moving it to America. You want to do this? You want to narrate the video? No, that's what I thought. There are a whole variety of reasons. First of all, the animation of Akira is a big part of the film's appeal. Seeing the dazzling bright neon signs of Neo-Tokyo, biker gangs racing through its streets, colored streaks of light following them as the city's maximalist decor screams in your face, just wouldn't have the same effect in live action. Though an adaptation could still craft its own striking imagery, it's still possible to create a sprawling, roaring cyberpunk megacity in a live action film, like Blade Runner's Los Angeles, but the smooth, captivating animation is a big factor in why the original is beloved. The breathtaking animated visuals is always touted as one of the film's major allures, and a live-action adaptation would instantly lose that appeal. But a live-action Akira captured the same visual magnitude of the anime, and if it didn't, how could it make up for that? Additionally, things such as Tetsuo's transformation just wouldn't give the same look in live action. While still grotesque and monstrous in its animated form, a live action, or basically CGI and realistic version of this would just look like really weird. So that doesn't mean it'll be bad, it will just be a very different experience. Another thing which seems to be relevant to all live action anime adaptations is anime aesthetics aren't known to adapt well into live action.
What the hell is even that?
The hair, the clothing, the expressions all look rather strange when viewed in live action, as opposed to the original medium. Although Akira remains at the more realistic side of anime in terms of how the characters look, given no one has like pink hair, gigantic eyes, and double D breasts, and also how they act, Kaneda doesn't get a massive nosebleed every time he sees a girl. There are still actions and expressions that are cartoony, and although they don't look out of place in animation, they would be hard to translate into live action. Also, how are they going to find someone with a forehead as big as Tetsuo's?
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the. No.
A major hindrance to an American adaptation would be how interwoven Akira is to Japanese culture. In fact, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were offered the chance to help bring Akira to the West in 1987, turned it down, reasoning that it was unmarketable and wouldn't appeal to an American audience. They turned out to be wrong, of course, but Akira is still regarded as being heavily rooted in the culture of post-war Japan. The film is essentially an exploration of post-World War II Japanese attitudes and fears. The initial destruction of Tokyo is linked to the atomic bombings Japan faced at the end of World War II, with Neo-Tokyo being a symbol of the reconstruction and rebirth Japan experienced after the war, and Tetsuo's destruction of the city in the end marking a new cycle of death and rebirth. The Olympic Games in the film allude to the real-life 1964 Olympics, Japan's showcase to the world of its new modernity and resurgence. The stadium in the film, which symbolized rejuvenation, would then become the site where Tetsuo would bring on the second cycle of destruction and regeneration, and was where Akira, who brought the first annihilation of the city, had his remains buried. The experimentation on Akira also hints at the human experimentations conducted by the Japanese Imperial Army in World War II, specifically Unit 731, who performed grotesque lethal experiments on up to 500,000 mostly Chinese citizens in Japanese-occupied Manchuria, despite the fact that Unit 731 committed some of the most notorious Japanese war crimes in World War II. When some of the scientists were captured by the US at the end of the war, they were granted immunity in exchange for handing over their research, and their experimentations were covered up, much like how the experimentations on Akira are hidden, and his existence is uncertain. The overgrown, disorientating and dying city of Neo-Tokyo can also be viewed as being a representation of the then bulging Japanese economy, gigantic yet near implosion, with Japan's economy stagnating a few years after the film's release. The claustrophobia-inducing clutter and disarray of the city exhibits a place ruled by chaos and uncertainty, with teenage biker gangs rampaging through the streets, mass protests, and religious zealots warning of the return of Akira and the beginning of a new era. This also represents the clash of the traditional pre-World War II Japanese society and the modernized, westernized, capitalist post-World War II Japan. This clash of old and new is a big part of Japanese cyberpunk films, a lot of which involve body horror, such as Tetsuo the Iron Man, which involves a metal fetishist who is obsessed with gouging his own body with metal objects. Just like Tetsuo's monstrous transformation, this conveys the relationship between people and the invasive encroach of industrialization and technology in modern life through hideous amalgamations of flesh and metal. Tetsuo's transformation is also reminiscent of the physical trauma faced by residents of Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the atomic bombings, which included being substantially scarred, getting radiation poisoning, and birth defects in babies. Tetsuo's own arc in the film of being a downtrodden and defeated loser who's remodeled into an OP character who finally gets what he wants, before he slowly destroys himself and tries to rebuild with metal parts, and then bringing his own destruction in an eruption of flesh and metal, is comparable to Japan's own narrative after World War II, going from a defeated, destroyed nation to an economic powerhouse to a stagnation. All in all, it's proven difficult to adapt a film which effectively explores the atmosphere and trajectory of modern Japan into something which resonates and relates to Americans and their culture, while still retaining the core aspects of the original story. When converting Akira into something for 21st century Americans, the writers had to decide between leaving certain elements as they are, in turn losing their original symbolic significance, or trying to somehow retrofit the story into some major American historical event, like 9/11, which is hard to do while still relating it to the general plot of the original story. To recreate what Akira aimed to do by exploring the sentiments of modern America is hard to accomplish, when also trying to stick to adapting the original story that was born out of a specific cultural situation. If an adaptation aimed for an American version of what Akira set out to do instead of adapting the general story, we would get a completely different thing, and in the end, no one is satisfied. Too many changes, you're being unfaithful. Not enough? Then what's the point of an American adaptation? Another concern for writing an American Akira is the fact that the manga is a lengthy epic spanning 6 volumes, which cannot be compressed into a regular 2-hour film, as can be seen by the vague, half-baked and confusing plot of the anime, one of the weaker points of the film. In fact, the film was being produced before the manga had even ended. However, given that most of the adaptation attempts seem to aim for a series of films, this problem may be alleviated more easily than the other issues. This is actually one area where an adaptation could trump the anime, finally allowing the story to breathe and play out in full. But even if you got past how to write an American Akira, and into filming the thing, another problem still arises: the casting of actors, which poses the issue of whitewashing. Hollywood has been known for casting white actors in the role of initially non-white characters, though it's not as bad as it was decades ago, like John Wayne playing Genghis Khan and Mickey Rooney playing an offensive stereotype of Japanese men. But anime adaptation seems to still suffer from this. Some may say that an American adaptation elicits American actors, and that adapting a Japanese story doesn't necessarily require having all Japanese actors, especially to stories set in America. But it seems to be the popular opinion for anime adaptations, and for Akira, that the actors should be Japanese or at least East Asian. This poses a problem for writers since all the attempts at adapting Akira place it in an American location instead of Neo-Tokyo, so they have to create workarounds to explain why there are so many Japanese people in an American setting. Gary Ritter's script had its way of getting around it, but it still mainly called for white actors to play the main characters. Having white Americans with Japanese names, for the most part, playing originally Japanese characters, adapting a film that is intrinsically Japanese, just doesn't fit right. Unless the adaptations totally disregard the original location and characters. Writers have to choose between completely whitewashing characters, partially whitewashing them, so you'd have a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy roll up on a bike and introduce himself as Shotaro Kaneda, or casting only Asian actors for the lead roles, but somehow still trying to maintain that the film is set in multi-ethnic America, specifically a diverse city like New York. It seems that Waititi's version will go towards casting Asians, but we're yet to see how this will meld with an American setting. Another practical concern that has plagued Akira's adaptation is that of its budget. Creating Neo Tokyo and all the various effects in the film would require lots and lots of CGI, which can be very expensive. Trying to squeeze the film into a low budget has led to its downfall before, but nowadays, with modern CGI costing less than it must have in the 2000s, and the fact that seemingly every other film being released is an orgasm of CGI, studios may be more willing to allow Akira more money to fully realize every aspect of itself. So the fact that the unpopularity of an adaptation may result in a box office failure must still be keeping studios wary of throwing money at the project.
But your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
So should a live action Akira even be made? Well, a lot of fans would say no, reasoning that the film doesn't need to be adapted to live action and is fine as it is. What would be nice is an anime series that fully adapts the whole manga, which does seem to be in the works. Still, a live-action American adaptation could bring Akira to a broader audience and introduce the story to a new generation, while potentially providing an interesting take on the original. Even if there isn't much want for nor faith in a Hollywood adaptation, it seems Taika Waititi may be heading in the right direction, staying as true as possible to the source material, and listening to the wishes of fans. Who knows, we may get a film that's as good as a live-action Akira could get. One that may adapt the whole manga and recreate that sensational, awe-inspiring aura the original gave us. Or it may be complete shit. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more future content. Tell me down in the comments if you'd want a live action Akira, and thanks for watching.